One of my favorite things about music is the live performance. I try to get out and watch live music whenever I can. And for a long stretch of time, many bands were putting out live albums. So it got me to thinking. In 1981, one of my absolute, what I think was the greatest live albums in heavy metal history came out. And it got me to thinking. Tonight, we're going to take a look at the Mount Rushmore of live heavy metal albums, the big four, if you will. Who will get on the side of the mountain? Find out next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of the Metal Dude Abide. Whenever you take on a task like what I'm taking on today, you're always going to have some controversies because there are so many great live albums to choose from. But tonight, I'm going to attempt to mark the big four, the Mount Rushmore of live albums. In the 70s, it was, the market was inundated with double live albums, and that kind of carried on through the early 80s, and then it kind of petered out, and you didn't see as much of it in the late 80s. I've noticed just recently a little bit of an uptick in live albums, but there for a while, the only live albums that seemed like ever came out were, bands that were way past their prime, digging through, old tapes of old concerts, but nothing really in the moment. These four albums are all at the time where the band was at their absolute peak. So let the controversy begin. Let's start off the Mount Rushmore of live albums. Let's take a look at the very first one next. Our first album on the Mount Rushmore of live albums, Kiss Alive. Let's start with the backstory on this one because it's one of my favorite stories in the history of heavy metal. Kiss had come out and had 3 solo albums, none of which had really taken off commercially, and so the band was in desperate need of a hit. They had signed to a record label that had never had any history with heavy metal before and was having trouble marketing Kiss. That label, Casablanca, was also rapidly running out of money. The band was broke, their record label was broke, and it looked like Kiss was about to end up on the ash heap of history. One of those bands that we talk about, way back in the day, there was this band that never quite made it. But then they had a brilliant idea. Let's do a double live album. Let's take the songs off these first 3 albums and present them in the way that we best connect to the fans, and that is with live music. And so the rest is history. Kiss Alive was a huge hit and set Kiss on a path of commercial success, unlike probably any heavy metal band at that point in history. So it starts off, right off the bat. You wanted the best and you've got it. The hottest band in the world. Well, I think in this one, hottest band in the land. Kiss. That is what makes these albums iconic. Little tidbits, things that just stand out. They do this again at Kiss Alive 2, which is why I kind of biffed it, because then it's the hottest band in the world. Hottest band in the land, hottest band in the world. It is an iconic phrase that if you start saying the phrase, people instantly take you right back to the 70s and the huge movement that Kiss was about to start. Now, they start the album off, and again, if you're going to have a double live album, you've got to start off and you got to grab people right away. What a great selection. Deuce. High energy. This really, it incorporates, okay, I love Ace Frehley, my favorite member of Kiss. His guitaring in Deuce is fantastic. Great solo. And then they kind of complement that song with Strutter. Deuce and Strutter put together is really brilliant. Really like the way they did that. couple songs go down the line, but then they close that side of the album, Hotter Than Hell and Firehouse. Come on, that's genius right there. She looks good. She looks hotter than hell by the end of the side of the album. And this is how they're closing. Remember, when this came out, we're on albums now. This isn't in a CD. So now the album side is closing. They've got sirens going off, the firehouse. This first side A, side one, unbelievably perfect. They started off with a couple of great songs. They end it with a couple of great songs. Everything's good on this one. Love side A. Now, side B is also very good, and it features 3 of my favorite Kiss songs. So, Come On and Love Me. I love that song. Later covered by Skid Row, by the way. Really a good song. Always find it to be very catchy. But then that's followed by 2 of their heaviest songs in the entirety of Kiss, Parasite and She. Ooh, that bass line in Parasite is probably Gene Simmons, best known bass riff, probably his best ever right there. If you have another song that you think Gene Simmons knocks it out of the park, put it in the comments below. I'll put Parasite against any of them. Side 2 is not the big hits that side 1 is. Again, they do have the great hit, but then they come in with a lot more heaviness, a lot more depth. Then we go over to side 3, and this is kind of the Peter Criss part of the album, because he's going to have a tremendous drum solo in the song 100,000 Years, and then we're going to close this side of the album with I guess Beth is probably his most famous vocal performance, but his best vocal performance is in Black Diamond. And this Black Diamond right here, I want to just bring that one in particular. If you listen to Black Diamond on the studio record, it's pretty good. But the live version, just that crescendo, the fireworks going off and the drums rising up into the sky, this is excellent. Probably one of the sides that, especially with Black Diamond, that I listen to the most. I think Black Diamond's the best song on the entire album. The one thing I will say, and this is, one of those things where I think drum solos on live albums, once you've heard them like 10 times, they kind of can be monotonous, but Peter Criss, very underrated drummer, has some unbelievable drum work on this solo. It actually is one of the better drum solos you're going to hear on a live album. So this side completely works. Side 4, we're back to a couple of really good songs with Rock Bottom, love Rock Bottom, and Cold Gin. 2 really good songs. Now, I will say the next song is Kiss's biggest hit, I believe, but a song that I'm fed up with, I'm tired of. Rock and Roll All Night, Party Every Day. I normally turn the thing off about this point because I've heard this song a million times, but you do have to also understand that when it first came out, this was still pretty good. It's just been played to death. It's one of those things where a band gets, that one song that the radios or whomever is going to play over and over again. If you hear a Kiss song on the radio, it's this song. And so you get a little bit tired of it. MTV would always go back to this era of Kiss. This would be the song they'd play, So this song's a little overdone, but it must be great because it's their most popular song. And then finally, Let Me Go, Rock and Roll is an absolute perfect closer. Again, Ace Frehley's guitar on this song. Oh my goodness. Ace Frehley, one of the most underrated guitars in the history of hard rock and heavy metal. This album took Kiss from the brink of extinction to superstar status. That's all you need to know. One of the greatest live albums of all time. Our first member of Mount Rushmore, Kiss Alive. Our second Mount Rushmore live album is Judas Priest, Unleashed in the East. Now, this is not the standard double live album. This is a single disc album, unless, of course, you get into the imports and all the things that happen there. But this thing is an absolute monster. It comes at the very end of the 70s and kind of encapsulates that 70s Judas Priest era beautifully. First off, it starts off with Exciter. Now, for those of you who, have been watching this channel, you'll know Exciter is one of the heaviest, fastest songs. Many people cite it as being one of the very first speed metal songs. And yet here, when it's played live, Judas Priest actually plays it faster than on the Stained Class album. It actually picks up tempo. This thing is a monster. Like, the fans haven't even had a chance to sit down and get ready for the show, and they break into this bad boy. Get on your knees and repent if you please. This is going to be a wild night. They set the tone right off the bat with heavy and fast. The second number is off their newest album, Killing Machine, called Running Wild, a very good track. But it's that next song that really starts bringing this thing together. One of the more underrated songs in the Judas Priest catalog, especially from back in the 70s, is a song called Sinner. The gallop on this song is so incredibly tight, very good. The drummer on this album is a man by the name of Les Binks. And story has it, as what happens with a lot of bands, there was some money issues happening in the background, and Judas Priest and Les Binks decided to part ways after this live album. Les wasn't happy with what his portion of the money was, etc. I tend to think this was a huge mistake by Judas Priest. This guy, such a great drummer, and he really brings it on this song. I love Sinner. What a great song. Then we break into maybe Halford's trademark song, right? The Ripper. One of the things we've talked about live albums before being like, this is very similar to what we just got through talking about with Kiss, in that if you go back to the original 3 Kiss albums, they are just chock full of songs, but the production issues kind of linger, and they come out kind of flat. They just come to life when they play them live. Here's another example of this. When you go back into the early era of Judas Priest, not their very first album, that is Rock'n'Rolla, but their very first great album was Sad Wings of Destiny, but very early in their career, and the production on that album is a little bit lacking. So one of the things that really stands out on this album is so many of the songs that they played on Sad Wings of Destiny get played here and become the definitive versions of those songs. It starts right here with Sinner. It's right here with The Ripper. What a great song. Really starts to establish Rob Halford with just as one of the great vocalists in heavy metal history. Now, that's followed by Green Manalishi. This song, again, the definitive version of it is right here live, because there's a great sing-along chorus to this song that if you've ever heard Green Manalishi live, the crowd interacts with it. What a great song. Really brings the crowd into it about the halfway point. Perfect placement. Then we break into maybe the mellow song. It's kind of funny. I was listening to this song the other day, and I always think of Diamonds and Rust as being this really mellow Judas Priest song. But if you really listen to it, especially the live version, man, they pack a lot of punch into this song. Again, Les Binks drumming, very underrated on this song. Very beautiful. And it always amazes me. We talk a lot about cover songs and how, you take a metal song and you speed it up and you put some dirty vocals in it or whatever, rearrange it just a little bit, but it's still at the essence a heavy metal song. Judas Priest had some of the most interesting covers in the history of heavy metal, in my opinion. And this is one of them. This is a Joan Baez song. It's like a folk song. If you've ever listened to the original, you're like, how in the world did Judas Priest see this and go, that would make a great metal song? Just an amazing song. I've always loved Diamonds and Rust. One of my favorites. Great. But the next song is where things really go crazy. Victim of Changes. This song won the Metal Dude 1979 Grammy Vocalist of the Year performance for Rob Halford, because this song right here is the absolute finest moment of Rob Halford's singing career. I think that if you were to say, it always makes me sad because I see a lot of reaction videos to this song, and they always, it seems like, come in and play the audio and the video from the US Festival, which is pretty good. And the reason they do it is because, of course, there's a video that goes along with it. But it makes me sad because if you really want to react to the great Rob Halford and his singing of this song, you got to go to this album. What a tremendous, that crescendo, A Victim of Changes. If it doesn't put goosebumps up and down your arm, you're just not alive. It's that good. This is the definitive version of that. Then they break into, oh my goodness. Once again, Genocide is one of those songs off Sad Wings of Destiny. It's a good song. But the riff that they kind of play live here to bring in that song is one of the best. You know, we don't talk enough about Glenn Tipton. We don't talk about KK Downing near enough. But these two guys are so good. What a great tandem of guitarists. And a funny story I heard many years ago, Roger Glover came in, of Deep Purple fame, and produced their Sin After Sin album. And he was kind of laughing about Judas Priest because he was saying these guys are in the studio, but they're playing their instruments like they're live, like they're doing windmills and they're just doing all the showmanship. He's like, guys, all you have to, there's nobody around. You can just play your guitar. And they're like, no, this is how we play. This is, you know, they play so well live. And again, this is a great example of, if you listen to the studio version of Genocide, you come away going, yeah, it's a pretty good song. You listen to the live version, you're like, wow, these guys play such mean guitar on this. You know, Halford gets so much credit because, of course, you know, he is, in my humble opinion, one of the top two vocalists in the history of heavy metal. But don't sleep on the guitarists of Judas Priest. So many great songs. This one, though, happens to be one of my favorites. So go back and listen to this one. And then they finish it off. Like we talk about, you have to come in hot and you got to stay strong throughout, finish it up right. Tyrant. Oh my goodness, do I love this song. And again, this song off Sad Wings of Destiny, also a really good song, but this is the definitive version. Halford sings it great. The guitars are great. Ian Hill back on bass doing his job. The drumming, everything comes together. What a way to close this album. You know, we're in the Mount Rushmore here. This could be the absolute best live album of all time. It's so good, but it definitely is an easy slam dunk for being in the top four. If you've never gone back in the catalog, way back to the 70s, this is that, like I said, kind of finishes off the 70s, and then they kind of break into kind of a new thing in the 80s where they really become popular. So sometimes people haven't gone back all the way to the 70s. If you do, start right here, because this is an absolute monster. Our third nominee to the Mount Rushmore of live heavy metal albums is the album that inspired this episode, 1981's No Sleep Till Hammersmith by these guys, Motorhead. One of my favorite all-time bands, and again, one of the all-time classic heavy metal live albums. First and foremost, bold choice here. Motorhead starts the concert with their biggest hit. Ace of Spades really starts this whole thing out. Now, if you have been to any concerts over your lifetime, the favorite trope is to really put that big hit at the end, usually as part of the encore, right? Let me give 0 F's about this. He goes right in, puts Ace of Spades in. You put the needle down, boom, Ace of Spades right there. You know you're in for a special night when they put this in as the opener. Ace of Spades, probably their biggest hit. He just let's just open with that bad boy. I love some of the vocal work of Lemmy on the song, in particular Metropolis. He's just belting out, I don't care. while he's just coming down the scales on that, really playing some mean bass on this song. Metropolis, again, one of those songs that, while it's good in the studio version, this live version is absolutely breathtaking. Love it. Now, my favorite stretch of this album starts right about here. If you go from the Hammer all the way through We Are the Road Crew, it's just classic after classic. Now, going back to the original album, this is one of those interesting things, much like the Judas Priest album we talked about. This is a single disc live album. Back in the day, the trope, if you will, was always the double live album. Kiss, we talked about that album being a double live album. Most of your live albums were a double. Motorhead keeps it nice and tight, one album. So this stretch that I'm talking about does encompass side A to the disc and part of side B. So, there is that. But on the CD, you can just run right through it now. Sometimes it's nice to have things on vinyl, but sometimes it's nice to just get that run through there on the CD. The Hammer is so heavy. The lyrics are so fantastic. One of my favorite all-time Motorhead songs. And of course, little Filbert is on fire in this song. I just love Filthy Phil Taylor. What a great drummer. He's bashing it right off the bat with Ace of Spades, but this song, I think, is like the second best track I hear up to this point. Phil Taylor really stands out. Then comes, to me, the mystery song, Iron Horse. I kind of make fun of this song because this is, prior to the internet, if they didn't put the lyrics on the sleeve, you were done. Me and a friend, one of the things you would try to do is figure out the lyrics to some songs. Me and my best buddy, really trying to decipher Lemmy's thick Cockney accent. And we would sit here going, the Iron Horse is what? Is it light? Is it life? Is it, is the Iron Horse lame? What is the Iron Horse? One of the things that I went off and did as soon as I was, the internet was like, you can get the lyrics to songs. Man, let's go find out. Settle the argument. A beer bet from my buddy from 20 years ago what the Iron Horse is. Really good. For whatever reason, especially in that period of my life, one of my favorite lyrics, wasted forever, ferociously stoned. Really dig that. Then they go into maybe one of the fastest tracks on the album, No Class. One of the things, though, about live albums, right, is you really start to get Lemmy's personality, that kind of tongue-in-cheek humor. There's not a lot of talking in this album. There's not a lot of, Lemmy can just say a phrase and it's just hilarious. And one of the things that he's been doing is he dedicated the Hammer to little Filbert. Iron Horse was to all the angels in there. But now, No Class, he says, this one's for me and Eddie. Hilarious. Really self-deprecating humor. Good stuff, and throws poor Eddie Clark into the mix as well. This is one of those heavy tunes, but it's also got that bluesy bass. Really a good song, and it has a lot. There's a lot of wisdom that comes out of Lemmy, and one of the lines in there that I really dig is "Too much, too soon." How many times in life does that come to pass, where you get a little bit too much, a little bit too fast, don't know what to do with it? Run it off the road. So really love that song. And that's how you close off when you had the original album. That's what closed it off, with that really high energy song. Great. Now you flip it over, and now you get Overkill. Ooh. At 1981, we have Filthy Phil Taylor, and we've got Clive Burr, both at the height of their powers. Two of my all-time favorite drummers. If you say Clive Burr is the greatest drummer of all time, I'm not going to argue. If you say Filthy Phil, I'm not going to argue. Two of my absolute favorites, both putting out tremendous albums in 1981. And Overkill is maybe Phil Taylor's opus. Like, if you were to say, what did you like about Phil Taylor? I'd take him right here to Overkill. the false endings. This song has it all. Um, but while I want to focus solely on Phil Taylor, Eddie Clark, oh my word, those endings, as they progressively get faster and faster at the end, you think it's over, and then it comes back and it's even more heavy and it's more fast. Fast Eddie Clark's guitar work sounds like an air raid. I mean, it's just coming in hotter and hotter. Um, I think this is slam dunk the best song on the album right here. Overkill, really good. Um, and again, I love Fast Eddie Clark. We're not going to get much more of him in Motorhead. He's going to move off and do some other things. But again, this original band, Motorhead stays good after Phil and Eddie leave, but they'll never be as good as when these two were in the band. Fantastic stuff. Then back to Lemmy's sense of humor coming through and you know, his down to earth persona. Lemmy was a huge rock star that never would be pretentious and act like a big rock star, right? So he comes out with We Are the Road Crew, a song dedicated to all the hardworking people on the road crew, but it's also, the lyrics are hilarious. And while he is honoring them on one hand, he's got a few gentle jabs in there as well. Times they're getting lost and, you know, can't find the hotel and all the funny things. This song could be right out of the Spinal Tap catalog. Love this song. Again, really gives you Lemmy's sense of humor. They do a little intro. They talk about the road crew a bit. Love this song to death. And then, again, I find this hilarious. Lemmy says, you know, now we're going to play you a mellow song, Capricorn. You know what I like about, you know, and it gets you to thinking. You know what? One of the things I love about Motorhead, they don't have mellow songs. Like Capricorn is not a mellow song, folks. It is a nice, heavy, powerful song. But for Lemmy, yeah, sure, mellow. They follow that up with the song Bomber. I think Bomber is one of the most underrated songs in the entire Motorhead catalog, and for a simple reason. They put out 2 albums in 1979, Overkill and Bomber. And while Bomber is great, it's not Overkill. So I think sometimes people skip past Bomber or don't give it as much love as it deserves. Bomber is really good. And then we're going to close off. They add some tracks on the CD, so if you have the CD, you're going to have more songs of this. But in the original album, they end it right here with the song Motorhead. And once again, in just a few words, Lemmy shows off what a clever person he is. It's like he says, just in case, and then breaks into Motorhead. Like, just in case we haven't kicked your ass thoroughly enough, all right, we're going to play Motorhead for you. What a way to go out on this album. You know, the hallmark of a truly great live album, you come in hot, you leave them hot. Case closed. Motorhead does both. This album, absolutely belongs on the Mount Rushmore. What an epic live album this was. And honestly, as I said when I introed this may have been the last truly great masterpiece live album in the heavy metal history. Sometimes words are hard. We got one more that's going to make the Mount Rushmore. Before we start talking about the final album in the Mount Rushmore collection, let me give you a couple of honorable mentions that, boy, came oh so close. 2 of the great double live albums of all time, Deep Purple, Made in Japan, and UFO, Strangers in the Night. Both of those are such phenomenal albums. If I had to have a 5th one, it would probably be Strangers in the Night. This was kind of the swan song for the Michael Schenker era of UFO. And oh my, what if you like great guitar work, getting to hear Michael Schenker live is a real treat. As far as maybe another single disc live album that might be a little underrated, Some Enchanted Evening by Blue Oyster Cult. It's kind of hard to pick a live Blue Oyster Cult album because they have 3 absolute gems. On Your Feet and On Your Knees is a great one. Some Enchanted Evening, and of course, Extraterrestrial Live. Blue Oyster Cult's another one of those bands that I think comes off much better live than they do in the studio album. Buck Dharma, very underrated guitarist. So they didn't make the final cut, but I did want to mention those three before we move on to the final selection. And speaking of Buck Dharma guitar, and speaking of Michael Schenker guitar, this is, to me, the definitive live guitar gonzo of all time. Ted Nugent, double live gonzo. Oh, man. This is a little bit different than the other albums in that even though maybe they're played on a couple different nights, you really see the band put the songs together in the order of the concert that they were at. So you kind of get the feel for what the beginning of the show was through the end and the encore. This is like Ted Nugent records a song, and a lot of times it's the last song of the night or the last song before an encore. So you hear him say goodnight to the crowd like 4 or 5 times in this album. So, he's mixing up his closers, putting all that energy in. And I think it really pays off here because while it's not a pure representation of his live event, what it is it's like the most energetic moments of his album over and over again. Really good stuff. Starts out just what the doctor ordered. What a great song off his very first solo album. And right off the bat, you really start to know that they've got the crowd cranked up in the audio. One of the things that I think is a huge mistake for bands is to have a live album where they kind of subdue the crowd. It's in the background. Listen, we're not looking for another studio album. We want a crowd. We want to hear that energy. I would say while the 3 albums before, I would say musically, some of the best songs and whatnot, where this one stands out above all of them is the energy that Ted Nugent brings to a live performance. You listen to Double Live Gonzo, and it's like you were there. Like there's so much energy. You'll just like instantly go crazy on this one. Now the next 2 songs, interestingly enough, and again, this is very unique, were songs that were played for this live album that did not appear in studio albums. So Yank Me, Crank Me, But Don't Wake Up and Thank Me, and Gonzo, the next 2 songs, totally new songs. Like he's just playing these for the crowd, never been on a studio album before. That's kind of unusual. We looked at Kiss, kind of encapsulating their first 3 albums. We looked at Motorhead, their whole early years collection. We looked at Judas Priest, their 70s collection. All of that was encapsulated. So live albums tended to be a little bit more like a best of. Here, Ted Nugent's playing some original material, 2 songs in a row, as a matter of fact. And then he breaks into a blues cover of Baby Please Don't Go. So that's not one of his either. It's a cover from an old blues number. But Ted Nugent, if I haven't, expressed this enough, is one of the greatest guitarists of all time. And he really plays bluesy, hard rock better than just about anybody. This is one of my favorite tracks on the whole album. Really, really good stuff. And then that's the first side, right? So we've got one song that he was on his first solo album, and the rest of this is like a cover and some new material, completely different. Then flip the album over to side 2, and he's going to play 2 Amboy Duke covers. The first being Great White Buffalo, the second being Hibernation. Now, Great White Buffalo, this is the first time really on the live album we start to see that energetic interaction between Ted Nugent and the crowd, where he talks about how his guitar is so badass and refuses to play sweet shit and all that good stuff, right? So Ted Nugent, not only is this album fantastic for the crowd noise and energy, Ted's bantering back and forth with the crowd, top notch. And Hibernation is just like a very long, like 10-minute guitar jam that will blow your mind. Some of the best guitar work of Ted Nugent's career. Now, side 3 is probably where you're going to get into more of the songs you're going to recognize from Ted Nugent. He finally starts breaking into songs from his solo career, and side 3 is one of the all-time greats. It only has 2 songs on it. The first one is Stormtroopin'. Folks, well, I'll just get to it. The second song is Stranglehold. Stranglehold is one of the all-time greats. If people know one Ted Nugent song, they know Stranglehold. But here's where I find this interesting. The song before it, Stormtroopin', has my favorite guitar solo in the entire Ted Nugent catalog, which is kind of weird because everybody says the great guitar solo on Stranglehold, which is fantastic. But I will challenge you, go out and listen to this album, and in particular, pull up Stormtroopin' and listen to that guitar solo. The tone, the intensity, I just adore this guitar solo so very, very much. Go check it out. If you love good guitar work, this is all-timers right here. The final side is kind of, again, more of his hits. He starts out, again, with some hilarious crowd interaction right before he breaks into Wang Dang Sweet Poontang. Really gets the crowd going. Really brings that energy back up into the album. And once again, Wang Dang Sweet Poontang has one of the all-time guitar solos in it. Love, love, love. Before he breaks into probably, if Stranglehold is considered by many his greatest work, Cat Scratch Fever is probably his best selling or best, his biggest hit, if you will. Cat Scratch Fever was huge. It fits in perfectly right here. Fun song, high energy. And then he closes out with Motor City Madhouse. And let me just, I mentioned this on another episode, but if you want to win a bar bet and say, hey, I know the loudest scream in heavy metal history, and you guys can pick whatever you want, but I'm going to pick this song right here, Ted Nugent, Motor City Madhouse. There's probably a lot of people who would take that bet. But at the 8-minute mark, Ted Nugent unleashes the most primal scream ever recorded in the history of man. And you're saying, so? Like, the guy screams, right? But this is the point of this album. If you aren't like jumping out of your seat with energy after listening to this thing, again, I don't know what to tell you. You are not, you check your pulse, brother. This thing has so much energy, and Ted Nugent has so much energy. This is at the height of Ted Nugent. So not only do you have fantastic guitar work, nobody will question the brilliance of Ted Nugent's guitar playing, but you also really get, maybe more so than any of these other albums, that essence of a live performance, the energy, the crowd, the interaction. If you want, of all of the Mount Rushmore, if you want one that best represents a live event, that's why it's on the Mount Rushmore, folks. Ted Nugent, Double Live Gonzo. That's it, the big 4. Let's recap once again. We start off with the amazing Kiss Alive. Judas Priest, Unleashed in the East. Motorhead, No Sleep Till Hammersmith. And we wrap it up here with Ted Nugent, Double Live Gonzo. In my opinion, those are the 4 greatest heavy metal live albums ever recorded. Now, I'm sure there's live albums that you guys like. Go into the comments below and tell me what your Mount Rushmore would look like, or maybe your favorite live album. Who did I miss? I know there's probably a few out there that, are going to have differing opinions, so feel free to put them in there. But that's our show for the day. We are here every Tuesday. One of the things we ask of our fine audience here is to go in and subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, give it a like. The YouTube algorithm will love you forever, and it'll really help the channel out as we are continually growing here about 1.5 years in. The other reason I want to tell you this is because even though we're talking about great live albums of the past, great albums of the the 70s and 80s. In just a couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about the best albums and songs of the year 2024. So we're going to just speed right up into the current. So you don't want to miss that. And the best way to do it, the holiday season is busy. Subscribe, and you'll get alerted to all this great content. Maybe you'll even decide to show up on a Tuesday night. We go 7 o'clock Denver time every Tuesday, and we'd love for you to join us. In the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. As always, take care.